Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Greetings, you're listening to the podcast, So There I Was. It's how all great aviation tales begin. This is episode 89. He cold-cocked me.
Oh, he did.
Welcome to the Navy, son.
Great story.
It is a great story. No sponsors this week, though, Fig, but that doesn't seem to matter. We still had money coming in. How'd that happen?
Well, we have a new aircraft tanker, new tanker aircraft commander, easy for me to say. Thank you, Rick Mosley. Thank you.
Indeed,
we are
sir.
humbled, sir, by your generosity and your support. Thank you.
We are indeed humbled by all of you who support us every week. We are grateful to have your assistance in bringing these great stories to you. We also got another 5-star review. Fig, we're back on track, brother. So
That's
this
more
one
like
goes, this one goes fantastic. Best and most entertaining aviation related podcast available by far. You'd think I'd learn how to say aviation after all these years. A real opportunity to sit in on hangar talk with the legends in military aviation. Great job, guys. So thank you for that review. That's great. We appreciate that. So,
yes, sir.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about our guest this week. Gallo may have something to do with drinking a certain brand of wine.
Ernest and Julio.
Ernest and Julio Gallo. So,
Yeah, that's a great story. You know, because I wasn't sure. And, you know, of course, he's a great storyteller, raconteur, as you say. And boy, when he told that story, I was right there.
No, too funny.
Had something to do with purple teeth.
Right? If you got to have purple teeth, you may as well get something out of it. And a good call sign is one of them. So,
yeah.
And then, but we start off the show with how we got this week's show title right away. He hitchhiked. You heard it.
Hitchhiked to the Naval Academy to start his education. His higher education. And he stuck out his hand to shake the gunnery sergeant's hand, and what he got was cold cocked.
Yeah. Gunnery sergeant stuck out his hand too. Only his was closed into
faster.
a fist.
Weird.
That's right. So, and he was determined to spend 4 years in the Marine Corps and then get out. As he said, he didn't have a military bone in his body. Instead, he got out many decades later with a couple stars on his shoulder and is a legend.
Yeah, tired as a major
Marine
general.
Aviation.
Yeah, and you know, one of the figures that you hear over and over when you and I were in the Harrier community. Holy cow!
Right,
he was a test pilot. Did a lot of testing on the AV-8B, I guess the Y-AV-8B.
Right.
But great stories, great raconteur, combat deployment in the F4 in Vietnam, and then just incredible stories.
Right. Wonderful stories.
Truly blessed aviation career.
Right. Wonderful stories from a wonderful man. We're privileged to have him with us. We're going to break this show into two. He spent 3 hours sitting with us. So we're going to break this up in the middle at about an hour and a little less than an hour and a half. Somewhere in the hour and a half mark, we'll break it up and we'll have Gallo again back next week. But for now, I think we go into this week. Any advice, Fig?
Yeah, let's get out of the way.
This here is a true story about crossing
Don't
the
sit on the
pond
ejection seat hand. Here comes
at
Gallo.
night.
Don't do it. It's hard to find
The
when you're
world's
sitting.
smallest cockpit,
Very tiny.
on the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So there I was. It wasn't always so there I was. It used to be longer. When I played golf with George Grottle, B-29 pilot in World War II and a great storyteller, he always started out with, so there I was, 30,000 feet, flat was so thick you could walk on it. As we played golf with George, he was a real piece of work. We were playing alternating shot in a tournament, and I hit one up on the side of a hill. It's about waist high, and I said, "Oh, George, that's a terrible lie." And he said, "No, you don't get it, Gallo." He said, looking up at the ball is a bad lie. We don't have any of those out here. So anyway, he's looking up at the ball now, but we miss him, and he's a great storyteller. And I've been looking forward to meeting both of you guys because you've been hosting some great storytellers, and I really enjoy your podcast.
Wow. And that is how all great aviation tales begin. And we've got a great one ahead of us today here, folks. Let me assure you. They are recording for the first time in 2024. Happy New Year. Repeat here, coming to you from New Hampshire. Where's my co-horse today?
I'm in Kearney, Missouri, just outside Kansas City. And boy, I am really excited to listen to our guest, Gallo.
Absolutely.
And probably seven pages worth of stories that I can't wait to get.
Let's crank them out. Let's go. Gallo, welcome, sir. We generally don't use names, but I think in your case, we're probably going to not have any choice but to do so. Distinguished career, retired Major General, United States Marine Corps, Phantom driver, Harrier driver, human being extraordinaire. Welcome, Gallo.
That would argue with the last time.
I don't think so.
No, that's great. So, well, how'd you wind up doing this Marine Corps thing? What interested you down this path?
Well, I tell you, when I was at the Naval Academy, I knew that I was going to start out. I was planning on just doing the payback, 4 years or so, and I'd probably be doing it with young enlisted people. And on the different travels in the Marine Corps and during the summers going out in the fleet, I never met a sailor who was proud to be in the Navy. And I never met a Marine that wasn't proud to be in the Marines. And so I said, that made it easy for me. I said, if I'm going to do 4 years, and I only planned on doing 4 because I didn't have a military bone in my body. And I said, I'll do what I have to and then get out, but I want to do it with Marines.
Oh, there you go.
So what year did you enter the Naval Academy, sir?
64.
All right, 1964. Okay. You were the class of 68, right?
Class of 68, that's right. A lot of interesting people. You've had a couple of them on this podcast already, but there's some others, Mike Mullen and Ollie North and Jim Webb. And
all right.
It was a very interesting class.
Yeah, when
I was thump, all those names dropping.
I know, right?
Beautiful.
Jim Webb was the Secretary of Navy when I was at the basic school. He came out to a live fire exercise.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was awesome having him there.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And I remember asking my CO about he at 203 when I went back as an instructor. He came in and took over as CO, Thummer, in fact. I remember asking him, what's it like being a CO? You're the same rank as this guy Oliver North, and all the things he managed to do. And he's like, yeah, well, you can't really do that as a lieutenant colonel if you. There are green lights and red lights, and he had no lights, or he wouldn't have gotten half of that stuff slowing him down. But
I think being a CO might be the easiest job in the world. You have a whole group of young guys that are anxious for you to do well. I would contend you got people that pretend that you're a good pilot. They'll prop you up. They want to make the skipper look good. And I would contend that if you're a bad CO, you have to actively work at it. And because you've got too many people, you're surrounded with too many people that are pulling for you.
Fair enough. But what amazes me then when you put it that way, sir, is how many guys are actively working.
Right.
No, that's not true. I think most guys generally wanted to do the right thing. There were very few guys who went out of their way to be bad COs. So
let me back up and ask you why the Naval Academy?
Yeah.
What got you interested in going to the Naval Academy to start with?
I watched on TV. There was a program at the time, Men of Annapolis, and it was pretty nifty. I enjoyed watching that. And the other part was the price was right. You had no question about that. What do they say? A $300,000 education coming your way, a nickel at a time.
Right.
I tell you what, the bottom line is, like a lot of things, you think back and say, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing. And so that's the acid test for me. And if I had the opportunity to start over again, I'd go right back to the Naval Academy. It's a great start with a lot of fabulous people. And like a lot of things, it's worthwhile. Not fun, but it's worthwhile.
Oh, there you go. It's certain it had to get more fun by the end. You can't be 4 years of hell.
I don't know. They did their best.
Fair enough.
I don't recall my fun meter being pegged at any point.
Oh, dear God. That's awesome.
So is there, I have a note here. It says hitchhiking to the Naval Academy. Did you hitchhike to start the Naval Academy?
They wouldn't even buy you a ticket?
I did. No, there was no tickets. I had 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and the hitchhiking was good for all the guys. But anyway, I did hitchhike to the Naval Academy, and I showed up, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And I met, there was a gunnery sergeant in a big hallway, and I walked up to him. I wanted to get started on the right foot. I put my hand out and said, "Hi, I'm Joe Anderson. Nice to meet you." And he cold cocked me. Apparently, it wasn't nice to meet me at all. And that was not the first time that year that I said, "This has been a big mistake. These people don't like me."
Oh, that's so that set the tone for you right there.
No, right? I have no idea. To this day, I can't fathom what would prompt him to just haul off and let me have it. I guess he did. He was waiting for some smart ass 18-year-olds, and I fit the bill. Maybe he was having a bad day.
Right.
And you were the catalyst that set him over the edge.
I think so.
That's almost a show title there. He cold cocked me.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Boom. Welcome to the Navy, son.
Yeah. What was your major? What was your major at the Naval Academy? Just out of curiosity.
Everybody's major was engineering.
Okay.
I did have a minor in English literature. So
nice.
I should have known better to even ask that, because I know you were a test pilot at one point, and they don't let underwater basket weavers get into test pilot school.
Oh yes, they do.
I applied every year, and I never got. I applied
it a dozen times, and I finally, Colonel Keck, who was he was the CO of the MAD, he finally wrote me back one point and said, "Always a bridesmaid," or words to that effect. But anyway, I wouldn't let him beat me down. I applied many times.
Well,
so what are you saying, that they just said, "Oh, this guy isn't going away, we just may as well give it to him"?
I think so. It was just persistence. But it was a fabulous time to go through, because they were testing the F-18. You can go through test pilot school and wind up testing radars forever, or right, some drones, or I can't fathom being, okay, congratulations, you can now be a drone pilot. At the time, we were doing the Aviate-B, the Y-Aviate-B, ski jump. We were doing the LHA shipboard compatibility test. And so it was all those things. It was a wonderful time to be a test pilot there. It was just, the timing was just very fortunate for me.
We did the pre-chat. You were telling me a little bit about some of the ski jumps. Was it the 15-degree one you said looked like you were running at a wall?
It was. It sounds like you say 12 degrees, 15 degrees. I mean, what can the difference be? Well, visually, it looks like a wall. I got to fly the 15-degree jump, never got back to the U.S. But John Farley, who was the chief test pilot for Hawker Siddeley, he wanted to fly the Y-Aviate, and they struck up a deal that they would send me over to Farnborough in 1978, and I would fly off the 15-degree ski jump. And I think I sent you that video. I had a small clip. That video was interesting only because it was you could see what kind of weather they flew test flights in the UK. I think I popped into it about 200 feet off the ski jump. It was bad enough to fly into the wall, but then you're in the weather. But anyway, it was what the ski jump did is it shortened your deck run by about 1/3. It was a 300-foot run that I made on that particular flight, and that would have required 900 feet off the ship, which we didn't have any ships at 900 feet at that point. And so anyway, and the other thing it did was it rotated you to the right attitude. So it was handling qualities wise, it was an improvement. Obviously, the point when you lower the nozzles, and that's changing a lot of things, that is a hazardous part of the flight. And so it increased the safety, because at that point where something could go wrong, you actually had a fairly steep climb. So to set up the ejection parameters, so it increased safety, it increased performance, and improved the flying quality. So across the board, it was good. The reason it was never incorporated, I think, into the U.S. ships was the U.S. ships, the amphibs, are, as you well know, are all pretty top heavy. They have round hulls. They have very shallow draft because they want to get in. The amphibs want to get in close to the shoreline.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can be quite unstable or close to unstable. That's a tremendous amount of weight to put a ski jump on top. On the deck. The other thing, complaint about it was you don't always have Harriers or V-stall. And it takes up a couple of spots. So you're going to have fewer helicopters. And the last thing was that it decreased the field of view for the captain over the bow, which I thought was kind of cosmetic.
Right.
But I had it fixed to that, all that, but it was roundly turned down. I think if you did an erector set with guy wires and things like that, you could greatly reduce the weight. You could see through it. You could only have to put it up when you're taking Harriers aboard. So it would become roll equipment and it would be much lighter.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what your loadout is in terms of bombs, you're not going to change the distance of the outriggers. You're not going to change the distance of the nose gear and the main gear.
Right.
So that erector set would just be grooves, and you could set up the airplane. And I thought it would have been an improvement, but there's a lot of resistance to improving the amphibs because the fleet for the Navy, you don't make admiral by running an amphib. You do with the big deck.
Sure.
And so that is really the diamond of their fleet, and anything that detracts from that or anything that might be a suitable substitute is a challenge to big deck Navy.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. But that was my question too. Why did we never incorporate it? Since it increases safety and
it's a shame.
Yeah, really is.
So
I thought so. I still think so, but nevertheless,
So
we're still close to the front of the show. I've got a question from the comment section asking, what was your most memorable moment as a plebe?
Well, mine.
Aside from getting cold cocked on day one.
Yeah,
that's an attention getter right there.
Gosh. Let's get back to that.
Okay.
All right.
We'll come back to that.
I have a question.
I have a lot of memorable moments. I hesitate to try and pick one off.
You mentioned something about swimming. Were you a rack or were you a flotation device?
No, I can walk on the bottom. It was just, I was not a deep thinker. I got to the Naval Academy, was stunned to find out they expected me to swim. And I recall you had to swim a mile in order to graduate. Well, that's about 10 miles for me because I'm using 10% for propulsion and 90% is survival. And so that was a real piece of work. I probably would have been in trouble if I'd gone through Navy flight school, but I never did. I may be one of the few naval aviators who's never been stationed in Florida.
How about that?
No kidding.
No, when there was a small time frame there during Vietnam where we weren't getting the throughput through Pensacola, and they were screaming for more pilots. So they took a handful of us and sent us off to Air Force flight training, and they took another handful and sent them off to helicopter flight training, Army flight training, I believe at Fort Rucker. And we were distributed to different bases. And so I was sent to Craig Air Force Base in Selma, Alabama. Now keep in mind, this is 1968. And I spent the first part of my life in Detroit and moved to Selma, Alabama in 1968. That was as much excitement as you could stand. But it was a different ball game. But I tell you, the people that I went through with, that's still the tightest group from Test Pilot School, Naval Academy, all those have alumni associations. And the tightest one that I've been associated with is Air Force flight training. We still get together about every 5 years. And in fact, we got together in San Diego last year. I had an operation on the previous reunion. And so they took a vote and put me in charge of the last reunion, which my wife said, geez, that doesn't seem fair. And I said, it's beautiful. It's exactly what I would have done.
Right.
So anyway, I was in charge of the San Diego reunion, but we had a great time, and it reinforced what I said to you before, that many a great war story has been ruined by an eyewitness. And there was an eyewitness to everything we did in flight school.
That's awesome. Right. Can I back up and ask you a real quick question? Because I wrote it down, but I don't want to get too far away from this. So I saw a video. So you alluded to doing some, was it YF-18 flying as a test pilot?
No, YAV-8B.
Or YV-8B. Okay.
Right.
Well, I'll skip the question.
Okay. I don't know much about F-18s, but I can make it up for you.
Well, let me just ask you this, because you may know about this. I remember seeing footage. It was being filmed from a chase plane, and there was a OA4 mic also as a chase plane, and they were doing like weapon separation tests on the F-18. I guess it was a YF-18 at the time. And this bomb released, and it kind of did a octaflugeron and went and took the wing off the A4 that was kind of in chase. And you see the A4 start rolling, and they filmed the whole thing. And it rolls, it's rolling, and eventually the guys jump out of it. But anyway, I was just curious to know if you were involved in that, but no, you weren't.
No, I wasn't. And I would have remembered.
Yeah. You'd remember something like that for
totally
sure.
Get that, but yeah. So, well, after flight school, you didn't go Harriers. You got to go fly the man's jet.
That's right. It was great. Actually, the first thing we did was we went to 103 in Yuma and flew A4s. And actually, at that point, I just had Air Force wings. And here's a tip: if you have Air Force wings, don't wear them on your first day with the Marine Corps.
Oh boy.
I might have. It's like
important safety tip.
It's like bringing in your medical records with VD. I mean, it's not the answer.
No.
So at any rate, then we flew for about 6 months. I think I got there in January, and I got Navy wings in August. And what you did in 203 was did all the weapons things that you didn't do in the Air Force. The Air Force is very good with formation, very good with instruments, very, very structured. Tactically, they didn't do anything because a lot of the guys aren't going to drop any bombs from their C-141s or whatever else they were going into. So undergraduate pilot training it was very professional. They tell you you're going to graduate with 120 hours. You're going to graduate on this date, and they do it. And so it's very professional, and it was well done. Then I got to 103. And they said, welcome to real professional aviation. You're with the Marine Corps now. You're not going to go out with a candy-ass Air Force anymore. And so it was great. And there was 3 of us. And we had to use the same flight gear because they were short on flight gear at the time. So we just hoped the guy in front of you wasn't airsick when he used the oxygen mask.
Right. So, oh, my gosh.
He jumped right into professional flying there.
Was that the F4 rag?
No, 103 was A4 rag.
A4 rag, okay.
And then coming out of 103, it went over to 101, and that was the F4 rag. And went through 101, by the way, didn't have any 2 seats or 2 sticks. It was at the time. I think the Marine Corps may have had a few airplanes with flight controls in the back seat, but at that time there was none in 101. So I flew with Gazelle. He probably remembers 30 units on downwind better than I do. I recall he got very excited.
30 units of AOA.
Yeah, which was really a bad idea, but it didn't bother me at the time. So anyway, there was but it was great fun. Then I got orders to El Toro, to 314, and that was the Black Knights. And they were doing, at the time, there was friction between NFOs and pilots, on who's in charge and who's this. And there was a number of pilots that were not fond of NFOs. And I think it was kind of an active plot. They took the very worst guy that they could pick and made him CO of 314.
Oh.
And that was my CO, and he was awful. He was absolutely afraid to fly. he put himself on the flight schedule. He told ops to put himself on the flight schedule every day, and every day he canceled. And so anyway, it was but I think it was a plot, because if you really had it in for NFOs and you weren't interested in them being in charge of anything, you take the worst one and put him in charge and say, "Hey, told you so."
Hey,
I've since, by the way, and I don't mean that as an attack on NFOs, because I've certainly seen some of the best in combat then. And when I headed out, we were doing individual rotations. There was unit rotations and individual rotations, and I was individual. And at the same time, a buddy of mine who was an East Coast F4 driver, we met at maintenance school. There was at one point, I was holding off to start 101, and we're in a pool down there. So I volunteered for all these schools. So I went to Ford Air Controller School, which was a mistake because that sets you up for getting a FAC tour.
You bet.
Although I managed to avoid that. I went to legal school. I went to maintenance officer school. I went to unattended mine sensor operator course in Fort Worth, Arizona. That's great.
Sounds like the only school you didn't go to was the Underwater Audubon Conference.
Yeah, that's right. But that was a lot of schools while I was waiting to start. So I met Julio, the other Gallo boy, at maintenance school, and we had a great time there in Memphis. And then he got orders overseas from the East Coast at the same time I did from the West Coast. And so he got over, and I was in Guam on leave. My father-in-law was the CO of the ship repair facility in Guam. I dropped my wife and young daughter off there. And then that's just great. This is you have to interview this guy. It's Ed Jazz. It's Jazz.
Oh, Jazz. Yeah. Jazz. First guy to jump out of his carrier.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll call him later. Anyway, I'd rather talk to you guys than listen to Jazz.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I was in Guam, and I heard that the squadron I was supposed to go to, 115, was just recalled from Japan back to Da Nang. And I didn't know what the rationale was, but it was pretty exciting to find out, whoa, wait, I may not have missed the war. And so that was pretty exciting. So I caught the next flight out, much to the chagrin of my wife, we were taking our first vacation in Guam.
Oh, boy.
And I said, love to stay here, but it got to run. So anyway, I got into Da Nang and checked into 115, and Julio was my roommate in Vietnam. And
hey, Gallo, what year was that?
1972.
1972. Thank you.
It was late in 72, and there was we were in Da Nang with 115, 232, and 533. 2 F4 squadrons, 1 A6 squadron. Charlie Panther was in.
He was in 533, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
So we were there together. And let's see, so then we were there for a month or so, and Julio and I were roommates, and we moved to Nam Phong, the Rose Garden. And that was an interesting place. The Rose Garden was just a strip in Thailand there was at first no air conditioning, no electricity. It was MR or C-rats at the time. And it was pretty sparse living. It was pretty sparse living the whole time. I don't know how much you two know about that, but it was not a great deal.
No.
And the only thing they sold at this little PX was they sold some, I think it was Pabst Blue Ribbon and Gallo wine. And I wound up with purple teeth, as did my roommate. And finally, the skipper started referring to us as the Gallo Boys. And so anyway, the Gallo Boys, it stuck. And so as a matter of fact, Julio is still, most people don't know that his actual name is Michael. And so, okay. But it created some measure of confusion having two call signs in the same squadron. So we broke up as Julio. When I see guys that I've served with in Vietnam, I always recognize them because they call me Ernesto or Ernie.
Okay. Okay.
So anyway,
Julio Gallo.
That's right. My Ernesto rubbed off, but Julio didn't. So anyway, that's how we got to be the Gallo Boys. Even the fax knew us that way. We'd come in, we'd say, is that the Gallo boys? Yes. So what do you got for us? We said, we got some shake and bake. We got some napalm and cluster bombs. So anyway, it was a lot of great stories, bad living, but it's what we signed up for. So it was pretty exciting.
Sure. Wow.
Very cool. So how many combat missions did you
219.
Is that all? Oh.
That's
okay. Well, so do you remember your first one?
I do. The first, they would team you up with a backseater who was a veteran, and so that was good. And we had some really excellent backseaters and so I had a very good one. It's really interesting. The first time you get shot at, you say, these guys are not mad at us. They don't want you to go home. They want to kill you. And I said, whoa, my goodness, that's a realization. That's a lot different than what you'd guess.
Right.
But my first one, it's great. 115 was on a unit rotation. So the whole unit came in. Then they went to Japan. They were there. They only had about a month left when they got into Vietnam, maybe 2 months, because we were about a month in Vietnam, then over to the Rose Garden for the next 11, 12 months. So on the first one, they wouldn't give you any forward firing ordnance because they didn't want you to shoot down anybody in front of you. You could only go south of the DMZ. I mean, it was some hand holding that was big.
Wow.
And you were really a nothing burger at the time, and they made sure you understood that. And so we did that for a while, and then the squadron rotated. And all of a sudden you went from FNG to old hand. You could go up north with forward firing ordnance. You can go on a bar cap. You can go on. All of a sudden, it magically were qualified.
How about that?
So I remember that. It didn't feel different, but geez, I got smarter without even knowing it.
So, and what's a bar cap, sir?
Oh, that's a barrier combat air patrol. What you'd have to get the C-130s up close. That was quite a trick with the C-130. So you would take off and with 12 Mark 82s, a couple of drop tanks, big tanks, and you're very heavy. And then you'd tank before you dropped your bombs on your way, so you have enough gas to get there and something to get home. And then normally you would tank on your way back as well. So it's two opportunities. And that first tanking was not easy because you're up around 19 units, which is optimum angle of attack in the F4. And the C-130s were a little bit underpowered at the time. They were pretty tired, some tired iron on those and engines. And so you'd be very close to, I remember there's a couple of guys had to go mid flap and min burner just to stay in. So you're burning almost as much fuel as you're taking on.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Which leads me to another story with that. I was plugged in and we had Tubby was our 1-star in the Rose Garden. And he was a real piece of work. He hid in his little hooch and nobody actually knew what he did. But he would come out in the sunlight periodically to fly 4 hours and get his combat pay and whatever. And
was he a pilot or NFO?
No, he was a pilot.
Okay.
And I don't know what he flew, but it certainly wasn't C-130s. And so anyway, he was in the C-130 and I was plugged in. And at the time, you had to tell him to shut off the fuel instead of just pulling out because they had some problem with the hose and the resin and it wouldn't cut off. You could pull back and it just hosed you down with fuel. The fuel kept coming out of the basket. And I think in one case it flamed out an airplane. But at any rate, so when you were full, you're both watching the gauge. When you're full, you tell them. You say, okay, cut the fuel or stop the fuel, whatever you want. I said, okay, cut it off or cut the fuel. And Tubby was flying. And so he did. He guillotined the hose.
Oh, shit.
I'll never forget seeing the hose part. And holy shit, here it comes. And so that it was just like a snake. It just kind of slowly came like this. It came back over and Jimmy was in my back seat, as I recall, because you say, "Yo, son, this is not good." I said, "It's great," and I said, "No," and then the not good turned into breaking both canopies, and
oh shit!
Then we had electric. And by the way, this is 12 Mark 82s on board, and so the next thing it did was we had I don't know what caused it, but it was an electrical problem, with total electrical failure, and so we can't get rid of the bombs. And the last thing you want to jettison the bombs, but because if you landed with them, there's a good chance one or more would come off. And we had fuse extenders on these that were all about 6 feet, so that made it even more awkward.
Oh shit!
And so I remember we were going to put out the rat. I said, "Okay, Jimmy, check the rat," because he could see a little bit easier back there on the left. He described it later. He said the rat came out there. The rat is a ram air turbine that's going to provide electrical power so we can jettison the bombs. And the rat came off and then kept going in the wind stream.
It just came off and left?
Yeah, you could see the corrosion at the bottom. It hadn't been used for nobody. I didn't see it, but Jimmy said, I could hear the dang. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, nothing." So anyway, he said, "It's gone." It's
gone.
And so I don't know if I think we were yelling back and forth because I would have to review the ICS. I just don't remember whether or not we even had, if the battery power I think, yes, it did. Battery powered the intercom. But at any rate, got back, landed, they downloaded all the bombs. None of them came off, but that was not good because you don't know if the ejection seat, anytime the canopy's damaged, it makes the ejection a little, right. You had to do that a little dicier, I think.
So what side of the aircraft does the probe extend from on the F-4? Is it left or the right?
I believe it's the right. Which side's the Harrier with the old fixed probe?
It was on the left.
Okay. That was the opposite. So it was on the right side.
Okay. Wow.
And it's back here. I mean, it's butt level with your head. So
yeah. It's not very convenient to see. Yeah. Wow.
That's a picture. I sent this in a cruise book to repeat there, and that was the picture of the airplane. I think the caption was "refueling off a tug." But you can see the hose is still on. That it stayed on through the landing.
Tubby was at the time. Would you say he was the group?
He was commanding general. He's a 1-star.
Oh, he's the CG.
Commanding general of Task Force Delta. Task Force Delta. We had a safety contingent or a security contingent of Marines. Pete Pace was a senior guy on that security contingent. And we had 115, 232, and 533 was there.
Okay.
533. It's tough. They would take off. We'd fly all day, and then 533 would come in and fly during the night, and they would go off and do a route pack all around North Vietnam and come back, and out of radio contact for almost the whole thing. And then about once a month or so, they didn't come back, and so really no idea of how.
Boy,
you'd have where do you start?
Right. Yeah, because you don't know because they weren't talking.
So anyway, it confirmed my decision to go F4s instead of A6s, I'll tell you.
Can I?
No kidding.
So is thermal barrier Turnbull? Is that in this time frame?
Yeah, that was in. That's great.
What is
that? We had a flight surgeon, Ned, and he's just a really good guy. OBGYN. Now that's a different story, but his. Yeah,
not much business in South Vietnam in the 60s, but 70s.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, but Ned was he was a scout. He's just excited about everything, and we screwed with him as often as we could. And he got me aside, and he had two things he wanted to do. He wanted to go over North Vietnam, and he wanted to go Mach 2, double sonic. He said, "I think he made that up. Can we go double sonic?" Well, I was doing a post-maintenance check flight. I was the maintenance control officer at the time. I had two jobs in Namphong, Thailand. One was a maintenance control officer, and the other one was drug abuse control officer. Hell of a job in Thailand. So those are different stories. It was not a high point in the Marine Corps history there, the drug problems. But anyway, so Ned says, I have an airplane that I'm going on a test hop, so it's a clean F4B. I mean, it's very quick.
Slick. No, nothing hanging on it, so no drag.
Nothing hanging in. It's just go up and check it out. And I remember nudging that over, and it was Mach. I think the max speed was Mach 2.1, and I pushed a little bit past that, and I said, I think it can go a lot faster than this. And when I got back, I said to the tech rep, I said, what is it? I didn't know if it was a compressor stall. What's the problem? Because the ramps would be fully out by the time you got up to that speed. And he said, oh, no. He said, it's limited by the canopy. I said, whoa. Yeah, you could lose the canopy or it starts to fail at that. So I said, so that was my last experiment. I think it'll go a lot faster.
Yeah.
So anyway, I told Ned, he said, can we do those? And I said, next time I do a test flight, you can get in the back seat. So when I was taking that clean F4 up, I got him. I said, okay, Ned, jump in. And it was great. We were taxiing out and I could hear this. I said, Ned, are you feeling a little lightheaded? He said, yeah. And I said, it's called hyperventilate. I said, hold your breath. Okay. Take your glove, pull up your face like you're going to throw up, and just hold it there. I said, is it clear now? You're not lightheaded? Yeah. Keep in mind, this guy's a flight surgeon. He's teaching all these things. So anyway, he held his breath. It felt a lot better. But I could always tell when I was getting excited because he started that heavy breathing. We took off. I did a loop in this is when we were still in Da Nang because I just did a loop up there. We're not that far from North Vietnam. Just run across so he could check the block and see. And he said, can we go double sonic? And I said, yeah, we can do that. That's no big thing. So we did. And he said, is there anything else I need to see? And I said, yeah. I said, you can't tell anybody. We can't talk about it, Ned. And once we get on the ground, I said, you've heard the speed of heat? He said, yeah. I said, I said, technically it's called a thermal barrier. And I said, in the thermal barrier, in F4, if you go up to about Mach 0.98 or so, what you get is the shock wave is going over all your pitot-static instruments, your probe and the rest. And so everything jumps around. I mean, it goes crazy, but then it's only about that small band when the shock wave is moving. So anyway, I took it up to that, I think 0.98 or whatever it was. Might have been a little less. But I took it up there and modulated and going back and forth through it. And the cockpit is going crazy. And I said, Ned, we are approaching the thermal barrier. And I said, and so I reached over and there's no air conditioning in the back seat, but you have it in the front seat. Yeah. I cranked that beauty up to about 300 degrees. And I said, okay, we're getting there, Ned. And I could hear him back there. I feel it. No shit. We went through the thermal barrier and we got back on the ground. And the only time in the Rose Garden that you weren't perspiring was when you're flying because you could turn the air conditioner on. Well, Ned got out of the airplane. He was soaked through everything. His flight gear. I mean, it looked like he had been dumped in the lake.
Sure.
And the guys looked at him. They knew exactly what happened. They said, oh my God, did Anderson do that? Did Gallo take you? And Ned goes, yeah, we've been there. It was great.
What a dick. I love it.
He got through the thermal barrier.
And Ned was ready to believe anything.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So anyway, that was it. He's one of the few flight surgeons that's been to the thermal barrier.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Hey, I want to circle back on just a few terms that we've gone over. First of all was the ramps. Can you explain what the ramps are and why that's important in supersonic flight?
F4, you have ramps that at certain, when you're packing too much air in there and you get a compressor stall, what it does is it starts to choke that off. And so the ramp, it's in there and it starts coming out like this. So
it's just inside the intake.
It chokes the air down going into the intake.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you aren't having supersonic air hit the face of the engine, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then AOA, we talked about that, I'm sure, before, but angle of attack is basically how you measure your airspeed in the airplane. So 30 units is extremely slow in the pattern. You were talking about that. And then someone asked us about FNG, which is,
that's a new guy.
Polite, funny new guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh my God. That is absolutely hilarious. The thermal burial. I think I'd heard a similar story to that one other time, a long time ago. And I thought, well, no one's ever going to fall for that. That is outstanding.
How about Rose Garden last flight?
Last flight in the Rose Garden.
Oh, well, the skipper had, let's see, he's passed away since then, but he's one of the best. Hank Ivey. He was just I don't mind using his name because he was just I don't know anybody who had anything bad to say about him. And he led from the front and he had a lot of good policies. He didn't mess around on your last flight when something stupid could happen. He was the flight lead. So you didn't have to worry about somebody flying under a bridge. There were not a lot of bridges there, but anyway, they weren't going to do something dumb on their last flight, and so he just said, that's easy. He scheduled, he wouldn't tell you when it was, but when you got scheduled with the skipper and you're getting ready to go home, that was going to be your last flight. And so I flew my last flight with him. We got too close to a thunderstorm and right under the anvil, not a lot of gas. So we're headed back and got hit by lightning and it knocked off my radome. So this is great. This is the safe last flight that we're going to take. Well, when it knocks off your radome, all your pitot-static instruments, everything goes away. And so anyway, I went home. That was I remember he had less gas than I did or something, but he handed me off to one of the new guys who had just checked in. And later on, he went to Harriers and in fact, flew into the ground in a Harrier. But he was my flight lead and he took me down to about 100 feet. And then he'd give me, cleared to land, kiss me off and go. I kept shaking my head no, because I didn't have any altimeter. I didn't have any angle. I didn't have anything to, he wants to drop me off with the field in sight at 200 feet. I said, no. Let's go into touchdown. Anyway, I did. I remember I was getting low on fuel and he couldn't understand why I cleaned up with him and stayed on his wing.
Right.
Because I kept pointing, I kept patting the dash and going down. Anyway, he finally, I think I just took a dive for the deck.
Wow.
What could go wrong?
This is horrible. So in this same tour, you had the C-130 guy cut the hose and it smashed your canopy and you lost, both electrical. So you had that. And then on your last flight, you ended up in kind of the same deal with no electrical or no pitot-static instruments because of the radome being gone.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I think so. Did you ever have combat damage? Because this sounds like, why would you want combat damage when you get shit like this on a normal day?
Right.
I never had anything that I don't think so. I wouldn't be so bold as to say, they never laid a glove on me.
Well, were your combat missions they were all CAS, right? CAS, or did you do DAS? What did you guys do over there in the F4? There's a couple barrier. Oh, I meant to tell you with the C-130, with the bar cap you asked about before.
Yeah.
Well, because the 130s, they're up close, they're above the DMZ, and they're pretty defenseless. So we had a couple F4s that actually, when they were going up on the raids up north, then in the C-130s were more vulnerable than that was acting as protection for the C-130s.
Okay. Barrier cap, bar cap.
Right.
So you did that mission.
Mostly close air support.
Okay.
And it was just, and then towards the end, it was not very good in January, we continued to fly. In January, all the POWs came back.
This is January of 73?
73.
Okay.
But we continued flying, let's see, another 4 or 5 months in Cambodia and Laos and around Barrel Roll, Plain of Jars. But at any rate, the problem was we were getting out of the range of the 53s, the Starbirds, and you're also they were no longer taking POWs. They weren't useful to the North Vietnamese. They had already released the POWs, so they didn't need any more, and they didn't. So at any rate, I remember saying at the end we were more vulnerable than we ever were in terms of if you go down, nobody's going to help you.
Right. Yeah, that's not good.
So but it was.
So was the F-4 a good bombing platform? Was it a good close air support airplane?
I thought it was. There's a lot of A4 guys that would argue that. On the,
well, of course, rivalry.
No, it hauled a lot. Nothing compared to what we have today. Nothing compared to an Aviator, an F-18. It was just iron sight. And so the precision bombing was less than precise.
Right.
I would say if you had to take out a spot target, a bridge, something like that, I would rather have a section of F-18s than a squadron of F-4s. Wow. I mean, if it absolutely positively has to be taken out, then you need the sophistication of today's weapons.
All right. That's saying something.
Yeah. No kidding.
The one kind of interesting thing, I saw that picture get brighter behind me. But you can see, and I repeat, I think I told you some of this, but when I got out of the Marine Corps, I fell into a fabulous job. My wing commander was General Jack Daly, 4-star former assistant commandant. And he got out and went with NASA, and then he became the director of the Air and Space Museum. So when they opened up the Hazy Center at Dulles, he asked me if I would be his deputy and run that place. So I started there 3 days before they opened and did that for the next number of years. But at any rate, his deputy downtown was Don Lopez. And Don Lopez shot his first Japanese aircraft down at age 17, was an ace at age 18.
Oh, my God.
And he went to test pilot school. He flew and he's just a heck of a human being. But at any rate, that picture behind me is a picture of him flying his aircraft, painted up like the
Flying Tigers.
Flying Tigers. And what is the shore-based version of the Japanese Zero? It's a Japanese.
Sticks will find it for us, I bet. Yeah.
It's shore-based. It was given a different name. But at any rate, that was his first engagement. He wound up in a head-on pass with the Japanese, we'll call him Zero, and actually had a midair, clipped the Japanese, took most of the Japanese wing off, took a portion of his left wing. You can see his left wing is got a little contrail. And so that was a picture of it. And I got that picture and I asked him to sign it. On the back of it, he signed it. Ammo was low in China, so I winged him. So, anyway, but Don was a fabulous human being. The other part that one of the nice things about it being at the Hazy Center at the Air and Space Museum was how many people came in and how many. I remember what was left of the crew of the Enola Gay, Paul Tibbets came in, and it was just you would meet these people time after time. And I'm trying to think of I'll write this down and get back to you next time. But there was a leading German ace, Gunther Rahl, and Gunther had his airplane at the Hazy Center right across from Don Lopez's airplane. And Gunther survived the war because when he was flying his airplane, and during the war, he got shot up by the same thing that Don was flying. And it shot up his cockpit, took off his thumb, and got infected. He spent the rest of the war in the hospital instead of flying combat missions. Everybody else flew till they died, or till the war was over. So he got off. So I was there with Don and Gunther, and they're standing between their two airplanes, and I had my camera with me. So I said, hold on, guys, let me take a picture. And I took their picture, and Don says, hey, Gunther, give him a thumbs up. So Gunther did. It's a great picture of Don Lopez, but that tells you something about his sense of humor. He is just a wonderful human being.
Yeah, well,
anyway,
aviators aren't busting each other's balls, right? I mean,
right. Easily distracted I am. I saw the picture behind me and launched off.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great. I
love hearing stories like that.
Yeah. And for those who haven't been and are looking for something to do in the Washington, D.C. area, of course, everyone knows about the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum downtown on the Mall. The annex out at Dulles Airport, the Udvar Hazy Center, is off the charts. Amazing. The Enola Gay is there. There's a space shuttle there. They got an SR-71 there. FedEx's first Falcon is sitting there, the Windy. So that's an amazing museum.
Hey, since we're plugging things, the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico is also spectacular.
Bingo.
Spectacular. All right. So I got in my notes here, recruiter orders. So was that after your tour in...
That's how I got in Harriers.
Okay.
I got a set of... This is 1973, and I got a set of orders to be a recruiter in Detroit. I joined the Marine Corps to get the hell out of Detroit. I put in for everything. I put in for OV-10s. I put in for, and finally they said, "How about Harriers?" My monitor did.
Said, was this because they were downsizing the F4s at the time, or are you just? This was was this standard?
I would have stayed in F4s if I could, but I said, I'll do anything. What else do you have besides recruiting?
Okay.
And they said, we got OV-10s, transition. No, thank you. We have Harrier transition. And I had never heard of a Harrier or seen one or anything. I was on the West Coast and then overseas, and I didn't know anything about it. So
sure.
I said, I said, how many seats, how many engines, all the right answers. I said, I'll take it. And so I was in the group, fired up 231. There was 542 and 513 were both down in Beaufort. And then we formed up 231, the first cadre. And I think I sent you a picture of that group. But there was no two-seaters. There was no simulator. It was just kind of discussed, you know.
This is the stuff that, we all heard about when we got to the RAC, and we're like, what?
Oh,
they did what?
The first two flights were conventional flights, and the guy that chased me on FAM 1 was Dave Beard, Rocket, and he was a Pax River after me, and after this tour, I think he went up as an instructor, but he wound up jumping out of a T2. The tail came off. They're doing steady heading side slips, and he got just ripped open, high over 400 knots in a T2, landed in the Chesapeake and it just split him open, and landed next to a fishing boat that had a thoracic surgeon, as I recall, was fishing. So he goes in the ice cold water with a thoracic surgeon who saved his life. He became a motivational speaker, and he would come to safety stand downs and things like that. But anyway, in his early life, he was another classmate from 68.
Well, that just is proof, though, that it's better to be lucky than good. If you got to jump out and be cut wide open, right?
He was an excellent pilot, but he'd only had 10 hours in the airplane or so, and he was my chase on FAM 1. I think I lost him on takeoff roll. We didn't see each other the rest of the flight. Anyway.
He had 10 hours. He was the expert.
The old salt.
He was the old salt in the
These were all clean Aviates, and they were rocket ships. I mean, holy cow! If you didn't overspeed the gear, it's because you
weren't trying.
I can't imagine not. You weren't trying. So at any rate, but there was some interesting times. I remember before our first hovers, you flew two, and then I think they noted the field, and we were down at Beaufort, and we're going to do our first hovers. But that week they put us in the CH-46. They soaked up the bubble so you couldn't see down by your feet, because you can't see your feet in the Harrier either. And so they turned off the stability augmentation system, because the Harrier is pretty squirrely, is what That's what they explained to us. So it was great. I've got a Marine major that took me out to one of the outlying fields and in a CH-46, and I'm with Rocky Nelson, who was our skipper, and the other guys. We're all going to practice hovering. And he said, "Okay, take it up to 50 feet." And I said, "Okay." I had been through 50 feet twice on each flight in the F4, so I had an idea of where it was, but not very clear. And so anyway, he took it up to 50 feet, and he said, "Well, here, let me do it." And so he took it up and stabilized it. He said, "Okay, you got it." I immediately put the ball in the ashtray. I mean, it wasn't pretty. And then he says, "Power." And I said, "Roger that." And power in an F4 is forward. So I grabbed the collective, boom, forward. And we did a hard landing. And then the crew chief was all pissed off. And he did, because he's got a lot of work to do with the crew, with the hard landing, especially when we get home. And the major says, "That's it. You're a qual.
You're it. You're good."
Yeah, we're going home.
Airplane's reusable.
You don't want me anymore. Well, that's great. Tomorrow I die. And so he said, this is the day before our first hovers. And so I see Dave Rackett up in the O Club. It's Friday. We go to happy hour. Saturday, we're going to hover. And I said, "Hey, Dave, how's the Harrier to hover?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. Compared to what?" And I said, "CH-46. He said, "Oh, shit, it's a lot harder." That's great. Tomorrow I die. Well, I didn't die. This is the end of that story. But I'll tell you what, that was it's pretty exciting. I remember Drax Williams, he wouldn't pull power. He must have been up at 200 feet on his hover, and the LSO is trying to talk him down.
Oh man, and he's the gent. Drax Williams is the gent that Sugar talked about inadvertently ejecting himself while stepping out of the airplane.
Yeah, same guy.
Oh boy, yeah.
And Sugar, by the way, I'll have to talk to Sugar. I listened to his, and he didn't brag about how his instructor is one of the smartest, strongest, tallest Harrier pilots available at the time.
And how long were you his instructor?
About 3 weeks.
There you go. One of my favorite stories in his books is when you were his AMO. And Chaos comes wandering down the street as a new lieutenant, talking about. Tell us about that. What was it like? You're the maintenance officer of 231, and this new lieutenant from the RAG comes down complaining about your department.
Yeah, he says, "I understand that we cut a lot of corners with in maintenance." Just what I wanted to hear, especially with the skipper for an audience.
Right.
By the way, I don't know if I was acting in my capacity as CO, as XO or AMO, because he called me in and Sugar did and said, "You're getting promoted." And I said, "That's terrific." He said, "I'm going to make you XO." And I said, "Whoa, that's great. Who's going to be AMO?" He said, "Oh, you got that." He said, "You're doing a fine job."
So you're going to be both XO and AMO?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We had another guy, though. Chaos was not. He was not the worst one. We had another guy came in.
Wasn't the worst one. That's high praise.
Right. Right.
He didn't get off in the worst foot.
Yeah.
So anyway, this guy comes in and he tells the CO he's a Naval Academy graduate and he deserves special handling.
Oh.
And I said, and he'll get it. And so I said, and so the CO says, "I got just the man for you." He said, "XO, you got this one." So we sat down, and immediately he wasn't my favorite. But he said, we sat down, and I said, "What's your call sign?" He said, "Rosebud." And then I said, "We don't have any rosebuds in the squadron. Pick a call sign." He said, "It's Rosebud." And I said, "Okay." I said, "On this flight, and I need you to have one tomorrow. And on this flight, you're 2. Okay? Everything 2. I say, all I want to hear from you is 2. And so he did very well at that. A lot of 2s out of him that day. And so the next day we get in, we're in the ready room, and I said, "What's your call sign?" He said, "Rosebud."
Oh boy.
I was ready for him. I said, "That's wrong, two dogs." So when he went to another squadron, he tried to change his call sign. You know how successful that is.
Yeah, no, that never works.
Yeah. So I think for the rest of his Marine Corps career, he was what he should have been, two dogs.
Two dogs. We know how that goes. Why do you ask? Two dogs.
Right. Why do you this is great, but just about the time I think I'm all through flying, I'm out of the cockpit for 10 years or so, I get a call out of the clear blue from Chaos. And he says, "Hey, Gallo, you wanna fly a Harrier?" And I said, "Am I on candid camera?" "Oh, it's a joke here." So anyway, he says, he goes to he said, "I bought a Harrier." And he said, "I need somebody to fly with me, and it would be good and get," I think the insurance people might have been pressing him for somebody with a bunch of hours and maybe test pilot background or so. And I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he says, "Well, you're the man." And he said, you're the first one that hasn't laughed at me." So
you're it.
So that was my qualification. But that's a long story. I guess we did that for about,
it was a while.
10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
I'm trying. The dates run together, but what that did was got me back in the cockpit. So my first flight in the Harrier was September of 1973, and my last flight was August of 2017. So if you do the numbers, I think that may be a record that stands since we're doing away with Harriers. 43 years is probably a good one.
Yeah, probably not many guys flew one over the course of 43 years.
Yeah, that's you're probably one of a kind.
Yeah,
for more than one reason. But I mean, that's pretty significant. Now, Chaos tried to convince Repeat and I when we were talking to him. He goes, "It's for sale. You guys should probably buy it."
When I listened to that podcast.
Oh yeah.
It was great.
Well, that was at the anniversary. He says, "Hey, you guys should buy it." You guys, we're like, yeah. So then we had him on the podcast. He goes, "Well, I'm working a deal. This guy's going to need somebody to fly it. You guys should fly it." I'm like, "Are you fucking crazy?" I would.
Those things look dangerous.
Those things will kill you. I don't. I know. I know myself. I'd die in a second.
Well,
I
thought I would be limited by the insurance. Because here I am, the 70 years old, and insurance didn't blink.
Yeah.
Like Art said, the L-39 was more expensive than the Harrier. We had a couple $1 million for air shows. There's a requirement. I don't know much about the money. People ask me all the time, how much was the Art's airplane? And I never asked them. I never paid for anything flying with him, whether it was a drink or a gallon of gas. Everything was covered, and it was great because he needed me and I needed him, and it was awesome. We never flew without the other guy either being in the other airplane or the paddles truck.
That's cool.
And I could say, "Art, check your seat safe." I could say that 6 times in a row. And he wouldn't say, "Stop bothering me." Or, it was just, we understood the only thing that could keep us alive. I thought I would be limited by the insurance company.
Right.
At some point they say, "No, we can't do this anymore." But they obviously weren't. For an aviation insurance company, I would think that a 70-year-old flying Harriers might raise a few eyebrows.
You got antiques flying antiques.
That's right.
Finally, high performance antiques.
Right on.
That's right. My wife said, when athletes are beyond their prime, they miss the playoffs.
Right.
Said, "What do you think happens to Harrier pilots?" I said, Okay, I get it.
Yeah, that's a smart lady. So, is this? You were at 231 Swansonian Plague Hoofs Lunch.
Oh,
Swansonian Plague.
Well, it was just some fun things that happened. It was a high energy group, and one guy, let's see, Rock Davis was one of my best friends, and he was my next door neighbor. And Rock fooled around with Hoof Proudfoot, who was our exchange guy, and they both perished in Harriers. But excuse me, not Hoof, aircraft accident. But anyway, he was our
British exchange. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Hoof Proudfoot. He was RAF. Yep, he was RAF squadron leader. And he was brought over to be one of our instructors for that FAM class. And he brought his lunch in every day. And Rock was diabolical. He would cut out with his knife the size of one bite out of every sandwich he brought in for a solid year. So Hoof started putting that. He would put it in his car. Rock got to it. He put it in the safe in ops. Rock got to it. And finally he just got fed up with the whole thing. And he went out and got some dog shit and put it on his sandwich. And that beauty in the safe. And so anyway, Rock cut out a bite of that. And Huff said, because he suspected who was doing it. And he said, how is the sandwich today? He said, that's actually the best one your wife's made so far. It was great. And then Mickey, you'll hear more about him. He was our Navy exchange, Mickey Squid. And
Mickey Squid.
Mickey Squid he was always bragging about his dinner. He had this and he had that. And he was a guy with a hollow leg. And he was bragging about you'd have a different kind of steak, a Salisbury, had this and that. And it turns out somebody said something to his wife and she didn't cook at all. All those were TV dinners that he would get a different one. And so we talked the flight surgeon into, he had his x-rays for something. He was moving from squadron, sometimes you carried your medical record and they got a magic marker and put something right in his stomach, just a lump. And that talked to the flight surgeon who told Mickey that it was serious because it appeared to be the Swansonian plague. And it turns out if you eat enough TV dinners, the foil will come off of that, and they tend to coagulate, and you can't pass them. You don't get rid of them, and soon it's not only are you going to set off airport monitors, but it's a serious problem. And so I think we carried him along, but he never forgave either us or the flight surgeon for going over the Swansonian plague. It was great.
Oh, that's just rich. I'm having a core workout right now. Like I've done 600 crunches. Thank you.
Well, that's what I tell you. It's interesting. A lot of times when you travel around, if you're the CG or something, and people will say, you can't, what can you see with a swanning into a squadron area and you walk through and you can't tell whether it's good, it's bad, or anything else. And I would contend, yes, you can.
Yeah. I would agree.
First of all, is it fairly clean? I mean, are they too busy fixing airplanes to clean up after themselves? So that's a good indicator. Yeah. The other one is, how are they greeting people when they come in? How is it a club that is I learned this from Spicer, actually, from Sugar, that when somebody comes in this ready room, you treat them like a long lost friend. It's not, who are you and what the hell are you doing here? And so that rubbed off. And the other thing is, can they laugh at themselves? Are they being so serious that and if you want a high performance group, they are generally, think back to some of the best outfits you've been in, some of the best people you've known, and you've probably laughed your butt off the whole time you were with that crowd. So those are pretty good indicators.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about watching the whole thing, Marine Aviation, when I got into it. Was it this love of flying and the rest? Well, not so much, because I threw up during flight school the whole time.
I saw that note. I didn't want to talk about it unless you did.
No, that was awful. I had a great instructor in the Air Force. He said the first time I got deathly ill in the airplane, he sent me off to the flight surgeon. Flight surgeon said, well, some people can fly and some can't. If you come back here, you're through flying. That's just how it is. And the instructor said, "What did he say?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what I thought he said." He said, "Okay, here's our deal. I don't care what you do." He said, "If you say take the airplane, if you lose control of the airplane, or you ask me to take the airplane, or you ask to go home," he said, "go back." He said, "Then it's done." So I found devious ways of I just carried a lot of barf bags and got through it. And the first time when I soloed, I noticed I didn't have any trouble at all. I'm not a very good passenger in a car. And I flew with Art. I've only flown with Art once in the L-39. He said, and I remember he did some null shavak. I mean, he set that beauty free. He said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "What do you want to do now?" And I said, "I want to go home." So that was it. So if I did it by myself, but I never would have gotten through Navy flight school, I don't think, because I didn't. But all that went away.
Thank you for that. It's truly an honor to get to hear all these stories firsthand from the actual legends. And you, my friend,
Amen.
You, sir, are a legend in the Harrier community. To me, and guys like Repeat, because this
Absolutely.
is what, when we showed up at the RAG, they showed us videos of all the A model crashes.
Yeah.
And then we started hearing all these stories from guys that were A model guys that stuck around. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for coming with us and sharing your stories. And thank you for your service.
Indeed. Thank you so much. And we also want to thank all of our active duty military, all of our veterans, and all the families who've supported them throughout the years that allow them to do their mission. We wouldn't have the freedoms we have without all those people who signed up on the dotted line and offered that sacrifice, and the families who didn't sign up and yet still sacrificed for our freedoms. So we appreciate that. We need to thank also a gent by the name of Dave Hamilton over at backbeatmedia.com. Dave's got a couple of shows, the Mac Geek Gab, the Gig Gab for musicians, and the Business Brain for entrepreneurs. Advertising for the show handled by backbeatmedia.com. If you have a show and you want some advertising, reach out to backbeatmedia.com online and see if they can't help you out. We have some terms. Fig, what would you do if you heard a term here that we didn't go back to?
Well, we have a glossary. So go to our glossary at sothereiwas.us/glossary. And if it's not there, shoot us an email. Specifically sticks at sothereiwas.us and say, "Hey, I don't know what this means." We try to stay on top of it, but there's a lot of acronyms flying around today, so let us know if there's something we missed.
Absolutely. Spring's coming up. Got the merch store, so go get yourself a koozie, a hat, a hoodie, but with spring and summer.
Bikini.
There it is, the bikini.
So there I was, bikini.
So there I was.us/merch. Get yourself in the store. Buying stuff there also helps us out, in addition to getting to look cool as you're walking around with our cool logos on your gear. So thank you to our Patreon pilots. We've got so many people that are throwing hard-earned money our way. We don't understand why, but we are grateful, in fact, that you do it every week. And I think we might have mentioned it on the last intro, but I want to go ahead and mention it. We're up to 5. We're going to make him a wing commander or something. Chucker there, 5-time tanker aircraft commander. Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So if you could rate us, that would be great. Go to sothereiwas.us/rate. Give us a 5-star rating, please. None of this 3-star crap that we've been seeing. Not happy about that. We'll take that under advisement. Don't try and fix it. He's listening today. Brad Silcott over at bdsaviationphotography.com, allowing us to use some of the photos that you take, sir. Thank you for sharing your art with us. It is deeply appreciated.
Sticks reminds us we have 496 members now on the So There I Was Facebook group.
Growing rapidly. 500.
That's awesome. 4 more to hit the 500.
Some of that music looping in the background sounds vaguely familiar. I think we've had those guys on the show.
That's the Dos Gringos, the 2 Air Force F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound awesome. Great music.
They do indeed. So that's it. Until next week, everybody, stay safe and check 6.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down in the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
He said it.
He said it. He said it's over.
You can't fight in here. This is the war room.